Hi, I'm Belinda Carley, the Director of the Institute of Personal Care Science, and today I want to help out you small brands there with 5 things that every small brand should know, but probably doesn't. The very first thing I want to talk to you about is getting pre-production samples from your manufacturer. Let me explain this one. So you might have paid a formulator for your formula, right? You might have made the formula yourself, right? You're happy with the samples that you've received or you've made. Then you go to a contract manufacturer and they are ready to go into production. Stop right there. Do not go to production until you've received small pre-production samples from that manufacturer, and they must match what you've made or what you've received from your formulator. But if you've provided the formula, shouldn't it be the same? No. Different manufacturers will have different equipment. Even more importantly, different manufacturers will probably, and often do, want to use raw materials from different suppliers. That's why it's so important that the formula you provide to your manufacturer lists the trade name and supplier details of where you've sourced the current materials from. Or your formulator would provide this for you in the formula that they provide to you. This is so important because little differences in the suppliers of some emulsifiers or some surfactants can mean big differences in the end product. And you don't want to go to 100 or 200 kilo production and find out that the finished product is very different to what you've previously approved. When a manufacturer makes a pre-production sample, you are then confirming, yes, that's exactly what I'm expecting you to make from a larger batch. And then it's the manufacturer's responsibility to take the necessary upscale steps to match what they've prepared for you in a pre-production sample. One final point on this is if you are getting 100 kilos or 200 kilos of product manufactured, you should also get pilot production made. Now the pilot production batches are smaller, around 20 or 40 kilos. And again, some of those big steps from a lab sample to a big bulk production batch can turn out different to what is expected. So if you have the pilot production step, you can check for any of these changes, because if you choose not to have a pilot production step and that large batch turns out differently, you could be responsible for the costs of the batch still. So make sure you get that pre-production batch sample, make sure it's exactly what you expect it to be, and then ask about pilot production if you want to be making 100 kilos or 200 kilos later. Include that pilot production step to avoid any problems with that larger batch and problems that you may become responsible for. Another thing I want to make sure that you're aware that you're responsible for is the safety, performance, and shelf life of your product that you put into the market. But I paid for a formulator to prepare my formula. Shouldn't they be responsible for the shelf life? No. Actually, your formulator is responsible to make sure that they make good theoretical selections that would, in theory, provide you with a good shelf life. But the actual shelf life testing is the responsibility of the brand putting the product onto the market. Now, in many cases, your formulator may be able to conduct that shelf life testing for you, but it will be an additional charge to the formulation creation. Shouldn't it be included? No, it's a separate step. When a formulator prepares a formula, they are responsible to make sure they select safe, suitable, and even stable ingredients that are going to suit the formulation they're developing and what should yield a good shelf life. But there is no way of looking into a crystal ball and predicting this with 100% certainty, no matter how experienced you are as a formulator. So the formulator is responsible to provide you with what should, in theory, work and have a good shelf life of 2 to 3 years. But ultimately, testing the product to prove that it will have a 2 or 3 year shelf life and is preserved sufficiently is the brand's responsibility, especially where the formulator has performed all due diligence checks and made sure that their theory is very sound. The practical responsibility, the final responsibility, falls on the brand putting the product into the marketplace. Did you know it's also the brand's responsibility to make sure they get their ingredient list right? Now, I have a great video on this to help you get your ingredient list right, so make sure you take the steps to get your ingredient list right. All other information on the label must also be compliant too. This includes things like your address, which must be a street address. A PO address is not sufficient, and this applies all around the world. There can be additional requirements for your labels, so if you need help with this, please contact us, we can teach you, or make sure your labels are checked over by a properly trained regulatory personnel. Did you know that any brand putting any sort of product onto the market, whether it be cosmetics, food, toys, is responsible to hold a recall procedure before they even sell their very first unit? It is a global requirement that brands have a recall procedure in case they ever need to use it, because the safety of consumers is of paramount importance around the world. So if there is ever an issue, a regulatory authority will expect you to instantly action your recall procedure. So you need to have one, otherwise you can't fulfill this basic requirement. Like I say, this is not just limited to cosmetic companies, it actually applies to any company selling any sort of product. They must hold a recall procedure. We do have workshops on this that you can easily access with templates to make your recall commitments easy to achieve. Just contact us and you can tick this box as done. Finally, it is a company's responsibility to hold appropriate evidence for the claims they make for their cosmetic products. You must hold this evidence before you make the claim. You must only make claims that are compliant with cosmetic regulations, which means you can't even point to other websites or testimonials if they don't fully comply with cosmetic regulations. But hang on a minute, my customers have these fantastic testimonials even though they don't comply with regulations. I'm not saying it, it's their testimonial. Doesn't that matter? Well, it matters to a regulatory authority because it's not correct. Even if the testimonial is truthful, if it doesn't comply with cosmetic claims guidelines and you don't hold evidence to support the claims they're making, you can't use their testimonial. You also can't point to other websites where information might be listed. So for example, you can't point to another website, even if it's a scientific journal, suggesting properties of certain ingredients in your products if that site doesn't fully comply with cosmetic claims requirements. So no external links, no links to testimonies, and don't make any claims on your product, website, or any sort of advertising or promotional material unless it fully complies with cosmetic claims requirements, the guidelines, and of course you hold the evidence for every statement you make. I have got another video about cosmetic claims guidelines, which should help you out in this area, and of course if you do want full training on this, we can provide that as well. Well, I bet you're sitting there going, well, I did not know that, to at least one of those items. Hopefully now you're aware and can find the solutions you need. Remember, ultimately you put that brand onto the market and you are responsible for these things. So make sure you tick off those boxes and meet your minimum requirements. As your brand grows, the regulators may notice you and may take you to task on one or more of these items in the future. So get them right now before you grow, so you won't have to worry about them in the future. I hope you found this video informative. It is there to help protect you from making mistakes in a larger marketplace as your brand grows. Please give the video a thumbs up. Please leave any questions or comments below, and make sure you subscribe to receive notifications about all our videos. Happy formulating!